With over 3.7 million miles under its belt, the American road network is currently the most extensive in the world. One figure gives an idea of its immensity. 14% of the world's roads are in the USA. This vast network includes the world's widest highway, the Katy Freeway. Located near Houston, Texas, it has 26 traffic lanes. The East Los Angeles Freeway interchange is also a good example of the density of traffic in the USA. Only 3 miles from downtown, it is recognized as the busiest freeway interchange in the world. And yet, although this immense network of freeways seems to be working well, it is now threatened by major financial issues. To fully understand the current situation, we need to go back to the last century when the United States began to build interstate highways shortly after the end of the First World War. Speaking of war, let me introduce the sponsor of today's video, Conflict of Nations, a free online PvP strategy game where you can choose a real country to rule during World War III. The game's advanced battlefield technology and real-time combat system put players in command of an existing world nation and its army. If you're looking for action, this is the game for you, as you can compete with up to 128 players simultaneously in games that can last for weeks. To carry out your operations, you can count on a complete military arsenal, including hundreds of weapons and tanks, jets, nuclear submarines, and more. But you don't have to fight alone. You can also form alliances with other players to win battles. You can play with the same account on both PC and mobile, so you can try it everywhere. Icing on the cake, you get an exclusive gift. Click on the link in the description to get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. Offer only available for 30 days, so don't lose time. Now, back to the origins of American highways. In 1918, only 1 family in 13 owned a car in the United States. Barely 10 years later, this proportion had risen to 4 out of every 5 families. A veritable giant leap forward, which radically increased the density of traffic on the roads. This rapid growth was fueled by significant advances in productivity, thanks in great part to figures like Henry Ford and his Model T, making the car more affordable for the general public. To support this frenetic development in 1926, the United States adopted its first numbered highway system, the United States Numbered Highway System. At the time, roads were financed and maintained by the states themselves. There were therefore no real national standards for their design, signage, safety, or quality of maintenance. But the first stones of the edifice were well and truly laid. As a result, dirt country roads and more extensive tarmac roads blend together as best they can from one state to another, with no guarantee that they will be of sufficiently high quality to enable traffic to travel at a constant speed. For the least well-equipped states, this is a clear loss of revenue and a form of exclusion from the rest of the country. At a time when private cars are becoming more and more popular throughout the country and rail networks are no longer sufficient to meet the demand for overland logistics, the country is dreaming bigger. In 1953, Eisenhower succeeded Truman as President of the United States. He and his administration embarked on a colossal project: the construction of an interstate highway system. 3 years later, the Federal Aid Highway Act was approved. This ambitious project aimed to create an immense network of controlled access highways, unifying construction and signage standards on a national scale. The initial cost of this vast network is estimated at nearly $114 billion. It was completed more than 3 decades later, in 1992. However, some experts estimate that the final bill was actually much higher. Taking into account inflation and budget overruns in some particularly difficult-to-build sections, the bill could exceed $535 billion. And that's just taking into account the cost of construction for the period from 1956 to 1992. These colossal figures are also reflected in the maintenance of the network. For example, in 2022, the US federal government spent $52 billion on maintaining its highway system. according to the Federal Highway Administration. To maintain these roadways at 2016 quality levels, an average annual expenditure of $61 billion is required between 2024 and 2033. This financial windfall comes largely from the Highway Trust Fund, financed by tolls and fuel taxes. In 2022, this fund generated $48 billion, with $42 billion allocated to highways and $6 billion to public transport. However, for over 20 years, revenues from this fund have not been sufficient to cover federal spending on highways, resulting in a need for additional funding from the United States Department of the Treasury. The Congressional Budget Office predicts that if current taxes and highway program funding continue to rise at the rate of inflation, the Highway Trust Fund will be used up by 2028, leaving a cumulative deficit of $241 billion for the period 2024 to 2033. Despite these pessimistic forecasts, studies have shown that this immense network of highways generates significant economic benefits over the long term. For example, a study by the American Highway Users Alliance shows that every dollar invested in roads and bridges generates an estimated economic return of $5. This figure takes into account not only construction and maintenance costs, but also indirect benefits such as reduced transport costs and faster trade. Despite staggering construction and maintenance costs, the accessibility and speed of road transport have enabled products to be distributed more efficiently, reducing delivery times and associated costs, thereby fostering the growth of local and national businesses. In addition, interstate highways have stimulated economic development in previously landlocked regions, making them accessible to investors and consumers. These states include Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado. A concrete example of a company that has benefited directly from the construction of interstate highways is the McDonald's fast food company. Founded in the 1940s, McDonald's enjoyed incredible growth from the 1950s and 1960s, thanks in part to the development of the American highway network. The extension of freeways created new routes for American travelers, considerably increasing mobility and road traffic across the country. A real boon for McDonald's, which has taken advantage of the situation to strategically place its restaurants in easily accessible locations along these new highways. This accessibility, combined with fast service and a standard menu, enabled the American brand to quickly become a favorite stop for families and other travelers. But beyond the fast food giant, the development of highways in the USA has also deeply reshaped cities and played a key role in making the car an almost essential part of Americans' daily lives. This profound transformation has occurred in a variety of ways, influencing both the structure of cities and lifestyles. The most notable phenomenon is urban decentralization. Highways have facilitated the relocation of homes and businesses away from downtown areas, leading to considerable urban sprawl. This process has enabled city dwellers to live in suburban areas while working in the centers. Commuting is a perfect illustration of this new lifestyle. At the same time, the development of new shopping and business centers on the outskirts of cities has accelerated, with these areas surrounding highway interchanges becoming strategic points for retail, office, and industrial development. This urban sprawl, defined by the expansion of suburban areas, has had a number of significant consequences affecting the environment, society, and the economy. In sprawling, low-density suburban areas, public transport is often less convenient or non-existent, forcing residents to use their personal vehicles for most of their journeys. This dependence leads to a considerable increase in traffic and therefore congestion and time spent on transport. The issue of traffic jams also has to be taken into account, both in terms of public safety and the efficiency of urban and intercity travel. This complex issue raises the crucial question of alternatives to the private car. Among the most congested cities in the United States, Chicago leads the way in traffic delays. Chicago drivers lost nearly 155 hours in traffic jams in 2022, or nearly 6.5 days. Just behind them are Boston and New York, with 134 hours and 117 hours respectively lost to traffic jams. And as the saying goes, time is money. In Boston in 2022, traffic jams would have cost an average of $2,270 per driver in fuel and maintenance. For New York drivers, this represented a loss of $1,976 in the same year. To address this issue, the bipartisan infrastructure law of 2022 allocates over $550 billion for alternative transportation projects. The aim is to reduce the number of personal vehicles on the road, reduce traffic congestion, and the impact of pollution on Americans' health. The plan calls for major investments in various infrastructure projects across the country. Among the notable projects financed by this plan is the Gateway Program, a mega project aimed at progressively improving and renovating the rail line along the Northeast Corridor between Newark, New Jersey, and New York City. This extensive program includes the creation of a new tunnel under the Hudson River. Long delayed, this project received a $292 million grant for the first phase, and work began last year. Estimated at more than $16 billion, the Gateway project will double the number of trains on offer while improving the reliability and punctuality of the rail network between New Jersey and New York City. In terms of passenger transport, although railroads have played a historic role in the development of transportation in the United States, their use for travel is much less widespread, and they are used primarily for freight. Aviation, on the other hand, is an essential and much-used mode of transport in the USA, especially for long-distance travel within the country. In fact, the USA has one of the world's largest and busiest air networks, with millions of passengers carried every year. Nevertheless, it's difficult to rank the different modes of transport in the USA in order of use. Cars, trains, and planes have to be analyzed from various angles, including frequency of use, number of passengers carried, and distance traveled. However, the available data generally suggest that the car remains the most commonly used mode of transport, followed by air and rail. So the car still has a very bright future in the USA. The country features an extensive, well-maintained and well-developed road infrastructure, making car travel convenient and often quicker. The most extensive and expensive motorway network in history is still going strong. Well, that's all for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks to Conflict of Nations for sponsoring this video. As a reminder, it's a free online PvP strategy game happening in a modern global warfare where you choose your own strategy, engage in epic battles, and take control of the world. If you try the game now, you'll receive an exclusive gift, so click on the link in the description to get 13,000 gold coins and 1 month's free premium membership. This offer is valid for 30 days only, so don't waste any time. Click on the link in the description, choose your country, and fight your way to victory. On that note, I'll see you soon for the next video on Looking For.